Welcome to Demand Gen Confidential, the marketing podcast where we'll be talking with some of the most progressive marketers out there, diving deep into marketing tactics to help you become a better marketer. Let's jump into today's episode. In our many discussions, just meandering, talking about nothing in particular, you told me that you owned a beach bar in New York at one point.
Yeah. So, and owned is a slight overstatement in that I was partnered with the New York Water Taxi and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the World Trade Center folks, to operate an amenity adjacent to a ferry terminal, which was a beach bar and stuff as there is now. And smoking had just been banned, and neighborhoods were still evolving. Brooklyn was still sort of coming up. And I had a little burger bar in downtown Brooklyn, really Red Hook. And the folks from the water taxi came in and I pitched them. I said, I should sell burgers on your boats. Those are the big yellow boats that float around the harbor. And I said, nah, that really wouldn't work, but we're thinking of doing a beach. And so they took me out to this place out. Today it's a state park, but then was owned by the Empire Development Corp. And is a couple-acre reliefing platform, which is a wharf as opposed to a pier. A wharf goes along the water, a pier goes in, and it could offload hundreds of ton equipment or whatever. But it's a reliefing platform and a big parking lot, and it's filled with joists from some construction project. And we're going to turn this into a beach. I'm like, okay, sounds great. And it's at the edge of the water. There's nothing there. There's no water, no sewage, no electricity. And you make it happen.
I'm here with Harry Hawk, clearly a man of many talents. I mean, Harry, what should the audience know about you as far as an introduction goes?
Yeah, a man of many topics. I'm a lifelong marketer. I'm a bit of a foodie, and I've, sold, a couple 100,000 hamburgers and about 500,000 hot dogs in between the dot-com era and my return to technology in the mid 2015s or so. And I love technical marketing, the applying technology, to make marketing more effective. I love all the other, creative aspects of it, but that's what really thrills me.
Well, I think we're going to get into that today because the whole basis for this, so my whole theory around why yet another podcast or why yet more conversations is how to unleash the demand gen nerds into the technical side of marketing as it continues to get messier and people want more profitability, and how we can tease out very specific things that we can do in our day-to-day jobs, which I think is missing. Sometimes there's things that are a little more high level. And so talking with real practitioners about how we can do that best. And so just to kind of kick it off, because now you talk with a lot of marketers these days, and just to kind of get a sense of what you're seeing going into 2025, like what are some of the big things that they're talking about? Not from like a, analyst's perspective of trends coming through, but boots on the ground. What are we hearing of what's going to come out in 2025 or to the end of 2024 for things that we should be thinking about?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, and many people are saying this is dead, but multi-touch attribution and AI attribution, I think, is coming to the forefront. That's one of the big reasons folks are coming to RevSure. And beyond that, there's a lot of other parts and pieces. But when we think about marketing today, and you're looking in HubSpot or Salesforce, Marketo, often it's really hard to look at either collective or individual journeys. And so we think about first touch or last touch. but it's like, well, what was that? We often see it the other way. We see which campaigns contributed to had a first cut touch win, but we don't really look at the journey. So that's another whole piece of it. And then finally, applying AI and data science to really well structured data. So, for example, we all know statistically it's possible that our Google account, our ads have been positively impacting pipeline and booking, but can we prove it,
Mhm.
right? And it's it's almost a rhetorical question. And we also know as professional marketers, there's some statistics that would probably go ahead and prove that. Most of us are not statisticians. Most of us are not data scientists, and we don't know enough about, do we have the right data? Is the sample size correct? Are we applying statistics in the right way? Because if I get a positive result or a negative result, is this something I can take to my boss? Is this something I can take to the board? And what we're seeing, it's part of RevSure, but we're hearing it from other sources as well, is lift test.
Mm.
And it's not a panacea. Oh, this campaign, we spent $1 million as having a positive lift. That's not enough to keep it going, but it's enough to validate that smart marketers understand what's going on. They can show that it has had a statistical impact, and then they can do the hard work or the legwork to really tease out where it's having an impact and then how to replicate that so that they can have more efficient results in the future, right?
Yeah. So you said something in that some people are saying multi-attribution is dead. Uh, I didn't know that, and I guess I'm curious, like, why do they think that it might be dead?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it's AI. Maybe there's a bunch of other statistical or data science methods, but even the customers are coming to us for multi-touch are still on some level using first or last touch. So I don't know the answer. It's probably part of their marketing claim because people are certainly frustrated by attribution. I think we can all agree it's not as straightforward as it seems, and there's complexity to it. And I don't think smart marketers should be afraid of complexity. Because we could say first touch. Okay, that's really easy, very simple. But I look at account journeys for some of my customers who have mid-market and enterprise
Hmm.
motions. And we look at the number of not just activities, because that's gets even thousands more than what I'm about to say, but we look at the actual touch points throughout their journey of a closed won deal, and it could be 2,000-3,000 touch points. And then you're saying, okay, at the first touch point out of those 3,000, that was the one that really mattered, or the last one, and it
Hmm.
just defies logic. The multi-touch is clearly better, and I believe AI attribution then is that much better because you really want to look at and find the meaningful, actionable touch points throughout those hundreds or thousands of touch points, and not limit yourself to, that 3 years ago someone did some outreach to someone and got them to answer the phone for 5 minutes and didn't hear from them for 8 or 9 or 10 months. And somehow that first touch is, where all the credit goes.
Yeah. And what are you defining as touch points?
Well, two ways. With RevSure, it's ultimately up to the customer how they define it. It's
Yeah.
kind of tailored, but for me, it's engagement, right? So it's clicking on an ad, it's coming through on organic content, it's opening or clicking on an email. For some, it's even delivery of email. It certainly has an impact, not as much as opens or clicks, and it's case by case. At an event, you've been to lots of trade events over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Is it loading up a list from the vendor, or is it people who came into the booth and scanned the badge, or is it something else? But it can be whatever, to me, adds value. And again, you can use lift tests to some degree to cross validate that, but I think it's more or less common sense. What was there a positive engagement?
Got it. Yeah. I mean, like, you have this whole thing around that's interesting about, even for some, something as small as email delivery, because that is something tactical to think about because Apple has all of their anti-open stuff to be able to track it,
Yep.
and it allows you to say, well, we're going to do zero-click marketing, to use one of the buzzwords, and allows you to put that in there knowing that that's something in there. And I assume you model that in such a way that you take into account that it's, maybe somebody seeing it versus like saying, oh, definitively, an email delivery did something for us.
Yeah. I mean, again, statistics work there.
Yeah.
But also, again, as we're setting up attribution and the classifications of what's an activity versus a touch point, you could say, for example, we want to count email opens, but if the email open and the delivery happens within so many seconds or minutes of each other, let's not count it
Yeah.
with the assumption it'd be Apple opening it. Now, it also may be that you're missing a few that way. There's going to be false positive and false negatives. Sorry, there's going to be false positives and false negatives. But I think ultimately, like all marketing, as long as we're directionally correct and consistently, so it's all good.
Yeah. So this brings me, I had sent you a whole outline before this of things, but I'm going to skip down to the whole attribution section that I wanted to talk to you about, because that clearly is a big trend that we're seeing. And, you mentioned smart marketers shouldn't be afraid of complexity, and really marketing gets messier and messier. I think that's always been true, realistically,
Yeah.
ever since the 70s when the 4Ps came out, or 60s, whenever, that era. I think it's been getting messier ever since. But like in this world of multi-touch and thinking about attribution, like how should we shift our understanding of it?
Well, I think we should understand what's the purpose. And of course, there's several purposes. One is ultimately, for every SaaS company I've been involved with, they got to report to the board,
Yeah.
and you got to report consistently quarter over quarter and show results. And so attribution can be part of that because the board is going to be looking at the big budget items, and that includes ad spend, right?
Yeah.
And so if we're spending, I don't know, back at Bird Eye, I was spending 4 or 5 million a year on paid ads. Would love to be able to justify that and get another bucket full, so we can make it 10 million or 100 million someday. But the other side of attribution is so that actually we can do better, right? It's not trying to justify what we're doing, it's actually trying to improve what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think attribution helps in both cases. One of the trends in attribution to help us have positive forward going impact is influence. Influence based attribution means no longer trying to be the King Solomon in deciding which specific campaign led to a closed won deal, but rather looking at all the campaigns and realizing, in fact, that we have teams of people with multiple motions interacting over months, maybe years. I have an enterprise client that can take 3 or 4 years to close a deal. In that context, we can look at influence. And influence turns attribution on its head. The typical methodology is to give every touch point 100% credit. So we're actually trying to see the forest, trying to get for a particular view or particular focus everything that's had influence,
Mm-hmm.
and can be really positive to see. We need to encourage our teams. We got junior people, senior people, we've got cross-functional people, and if you're slaving away working on regional trade shows, we want to encourage you that you're having an impact on this business, and just replicate that across your content team, across every motion, extend to BDRs, SDRs, sales funnel, all of that. It can't be that there's one or two silos like they always get the first or the last touch, and that's the only thing that we can justify, and the rest of them, we don't give you the budget, we don't give you the impact, credit, and we don't give you the resources, even just intellectually, with other team members to help you succeed. So to me, the proper way to think about attribution is to really understand what's going on. We do that with influence. We do that with multi-touch, and we do that with AI-based attribution as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to dig into this influence thing a little bit because like I have two questions, two follow-up questions to that. The first is like if we're giving 100% to everything, how do we actually decide what is working and meaningful in all of that versus, what's not? So let me give an example. So discounting. So I was at a company that we did a lot of discounting, and the argument was, or the thought process was that we were essentially just leaving money on the table because we were discounting for people who were going to buy anyways. So, like, let's take the trade show. You've got an active deal, and somebody stops by your booth, and then you give that deal credit, but that person was going to buy anyways, regardless of whether they stopped by. They just wanted to stop by, you know, say hi and move on, but they got scanned as, engaged at booth, and then got counted as a touch point. And in that
Yeah.
scenario, there's probably something up funnel where they requested a demo to kick off the whole sales process, or it could have been outbound. I don't know, like in this case. So
Well, I have a fictitious example I love to say.
yeah.
Imagine you're selling cars, you got a car dealership, you're doing some kind of full funnel attribution,
Hmm.
and there's one sort of major road to your dealership, and about a half mile before the dealership, you've got a billboard, Harry's and Logan's automobiles. And that sign, everyone's going to pass by it, is going to get, credit for every sale.
Yeah.
And it's the same scenario, who came to the booth versus who came to the booth because they were aware or unaware. That they were unaware and became engaged in the booth and purchased is obviously a lot more valuable than as you said, the person who's going to buy and just, wanted to meet someone or say hello or drop by, see if you had any interesting swag. And in the meantime, get scanned and, decides to pick up that coupon or accept a coupon. I think lift test and other statistical methods can really help tease out some of the differences in those programs,
Yeah.
but also a fusion data. If we're only looking at Salesforce or HubSpot, there's so much that we're missing. Meaning, we may not have every ad touch point. We may not have a full view of all of the emails. So it may be particularly in a B2B SaaS environment, um, the fact that we can look back a year or two or longer, whatever framework we are looking at, and say, oh yeah, this person who came into the booth, in fact, had been engaged with us over the last year and a half. Now, if it is a consumer product, then you know maybe you don't have that kind of information, but I
Yeah.
think we tend to be able to stitch that journey together for our customers, including, for example, organic and paid attribution on LinkedIn. So if accounts are engaging with you on LinkedIn, we can pull that in at the account level. LinkedIn doesn't make individual engagement available, but you can say, oh, this account was engaged with us on LinkedIn leading up to the trade show. And things like that can help. So then when we say give 100% credit to all of the touch points, again, just imagine that there's hundreds. And so then for a particular account, it's unlikely that they're going to have all of them.
Yeah.
So it's just a way of unhiding the actual touch points that were involved. And then you can go further because when we do attribution and you think of a traditional funnel, let's say lead, MQL, SQL, SAL, opportunity, pipeline, closed, at each of those stages, we can do attribution to that stage. So we can do one set of attribution to close one, and it's going to have a lot more touch points in it because it's over the full funnel. But we can do attribution to meeting set or, negotiate contract, or whatever the different stages are. And so by using influence, it can help tease out um, ultimately the repeatable motion. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah. Um, Interesting. I don't have much follow up on that, but the second question I had in this whole influence realm, it's still in the influence. So I'm a big follower of Chris Walker. So anybody that ends up listening to this, if you don't listen to him, he's awesome. And one of the things he's talking about now, which I find super interesting and I think is relatively progressive, is the idea of it kind of fits with this whole influence model in blending all the activities together. And by blending all activities together, the way I'm understanding, and I need to do more research because I want to put this into practice somewhere, is not just marketing, but marketing, sales, and CS around a different labeled organization that's not marketing any longer, it's pipeline generation. And so essentially breaking this marketing and pipe or breaking the marketing team or marketing and sales motions, however you want to phrase it, up into two separate things where it's strategy, which gets your brand, your analyst relations and product marketing and everything on the strategy side, which is equally important as this pipeline creation side, which then is where all this influencing and modeling fits. And one of the things that we're talking about is having different models in that motion. So then, like, you're starting to layer on spend in a very specific framework. So you're not taking messaging changes and trying to put revenue attribution directly onto messaging changes, but in demo request from Google Ads, you get that direct attribution because that is something that you should look at almost. I mean, like,
yeah. But let's talk about lift test for a second
yeah,
because it's got a role in here. So yeah, we change on Agent AI where I also work. We change the button that starts an AI agent from hire to go.
right.
All right, and so you know we haven't, but you could do some analysis around that. But you talked about copy changes. So a lift test in RevSure, conversion lift test, we have several. We have a full incrementality suite of tools, but just looking at conversion lift test, we create a Boolean variable. Was this account, was this opportunity, or was this lead touched by Google Ads? Or did this lead, opportunity, or account, true or false, go to an event or this event or just any construct that can be answered true or false.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have enough data, you can get into it. So if you had a way, through say campaign name taxonomy, so or maybe some combination of campaign name and UTM parameters, which folks saw headline one and which folks saw headline two. So you're going to have to establish a control group. So we might say, true, did they see headline number two? And then you can see, did it have a lift? And if it did, it might be worth then digging into seeing maybe that headline did have an impact even without spend. You can do market mix modeling that's very heavily weighted on spend, but there's AI and statistical methods where you can do it without spend. But you need these different models and different weights to help direct, what you're going to look at. I don't know if that answers kind of understand, different views because different lenses and filters help you see things that you wouldn't see, with the naked eye. And that's how I think about models.
Interesting. So we're in the weeds with multi-touch. We're looking at lift tests of all these individual things. And you brought up a really good point early on in that every organization you've worked for, every organization I've worked for, there's a board, there's executives that you have to present metrics to that make sense. And we
Yep.
can't spend ultimately things have to roll up so that we can make broad strokes decision. An organization can make a broad stroke decision because you can't be in the weeds on every single thing. I mean, you see it in public companies, they all have top line metrics and everything. So, how do you take this forest and translate it up the chain into something that's digestible for everybody who's not in the weeds every day?
And obviously board reporting isn't necessarily my expertise, but I've certainly
Yeah.
helped a bunch of clients that are, doing that on a quarterly, if not more frequent basis, or if it's not a board report, it's a quarterly business review, a QBR, an OKR, any of these sorts of, regular reporting
Well,
things that,
not to make you pin it on the board portion, but just laddering up to company level metrics, let's call it.
yeah, which is fair. All of that, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you the kinds of questions that they come to me and the customer support team at RevSure, for example, it can be some really simple things, but like, return on ad spend based on a whole bunch of different channels, but breaking those channels down so that it's not five channels and it's not 500 channels, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's a bunch of actionable pieces, or they're planning for next year and they really want to understand how well they did this year, what things worked, but also to have that baseline so that when they're going through and they're saying, hey, trade shows worked really well for us last year, we're going to do more of them. It's a lot easier to sell in when you also say, and these were the actual conversion metrics. And we think when we do this and increase this spend, or, this slightly different mix of trade shows, we're going to have an improvement and we'll track against this baseline, because you need to have a prediction and you need to have measurement, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to roll it up. I mentioned that a lot of customers I work with still use first or last touch, and often that's in a board presentation or something like you. It's always been reported that way, and so it's very hard to go in and say, okay, we're going to report this number differently, but then you need to layer on other metrics to help you justify all of the different spends. I think a big part of where AI attribution, market mix modeling, lift test come into play is particularly something like LinkedIn. We know it's important. We know businesses are on there. We also know that not every person at every business is there.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it can at times feel a little bit expensive. And so it's a big one that can really pay off, but you need to really tease out the value. And so that's also something where all of these come into play. And I keep on coming back to, it's not just things to triangulate, to find the things that are working that have the most impact,
Mm-hmm.
and then the things that pair well with them, like, wine with a meal. And that there, because there are several things that work, well together, like doing webinars maybe and posting about those webinars on LinkedIn.
That's an interesting point in, sorry, I'm jotting it down for our key takeaways at the end. Uh, is what works well and then what's the pairing essentially. And the webinar is a good example, but like probably a really good example is, high intent Google keywords that request a demo, because that should in
Yep.
itself be, a high intent signal that should, you should be able to get those into opportunities at a pretty good rate. And so the
Yes.
question is like what to pair with it. And it could be, SDR follow up, or making it easy for on that form field to book time. And these are like all little things in that pair well. And you're not necessarily going to, like, if you go buy a chili piper or, use HubSpot's meetings link, like you may not be able to attribute that spend, but it pairs very well with that, particular motion. There's, obviously stuff that's more complex than that, but I think that's an interesting concept of finding what works well and then what pairs well.
And also that high intent keyword search didn't come out of thin air. I mean, it might have. Someone might have woken up one day and said, you know, I need a B2B SaaS tool to help me figure out, my attribution. And they go search for that and they never heard of you. They see you, they click, and, a couple months later, they're happy customers. But there are obviously activities that drive that. And so something again from my days at Bird Eye, they were able to show that spend on Facebook at that time, this is 2018, had a 2 to 3 week delay and had a statistical impact on branded search, and it increased 5% compound week over week. So,
Let me
you
see
know,
if I understand that. So the Facebook essentially, because you're spreading the message to so many people, they're then, rather than clicking on the ad or doing anything in Facebook's platform or Meta, however you want to use the term now, they're just then going and searching for your company, and that's how you're seeing
with
that particular
yep,
spend, and it
yep,
basically
and it was
correlating it.
yeah, and this was a very strange test that no one would normally do, but I won't go into the details, but it was a very strong test, had a very strong signal, it was very clear, and it's that delay though of 2 to 3 weeks that can make a lot of smart marketers fumble in that. Okay, we're used to, you put in a coin in a gumball machine and a gumball comes out. We're not used to you put a coin into a payphone and 3 days later you're walking by a barber shop and a gumball comes out of a gumball machine. But that's sort of Facebook and search, right? That, they seem disconnected. Again, market mix modeling can help us get to finding that answer. Lift test, and more importantly, even another incrementality test, pre and post test. Example, a customer um, decided, as we all do, got approval. We're going to double roughly our demand gen
Mm-hmm.
spend. Great. It's working really well. They got a great team, truly great team. They had a very marginal increase. So what's going on? Why, like alarm bells are going off. We're talking about it with the CEO. What's happening? And by the way, at the same time, their AE motion went off like a rocket.
Yeah.
Now, I think most of us would say, okay, just like the Facebook example in search, you did a whole bunch more spend on search, and guess what? The AEs got a lot more efficient. Um, and we all would probably want to take credit for that. Of course, that was our demand spend. But again, can we show that or demonstrate that in a way that we can take that to the board, that the CEO can sleep well at night? Because on the face of it, you doubled the spend and you got nothing for it. With the pre and post analysis, we were able to show a direct and positive correlation between that spend and the increase in the AE productivity.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you make a point through all of this around lift tests and statistical significance, and a lot of that, like, I don't know if you see it in B2B as often because sometimes the volumes are a lot lower, but I worked at a business that had a B2C motion, or it operated a little more like a B2C motion, and they did it all the time because they had the volume. And we had statisticians on the marketing team that helped us move past the data fallacies and, run these types of things. Like I always say, like, during that time I got, data science 101. I probably need 102 and 104 and more now, but it was enlightening because to your Facebook example, you have to run some kind of statistical analysis and, figure out if you're going to continue doing it or not.
Right. And but that observation from 2018 may or may not be true today. So it's also continuing, to check the pulse on that. In every demand gen role I've ever been, there's always, and at some point, a question, we're thinking of adding to the team. what kind of resource would you want? And I've always immediately and without question said, I need a data scientist.
Yeah.
And without fail, I've never gotten one.
Well, my
And,
goal.
and so,
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, no. So to, to, to me, the power of a tool like RevSure, and there's others, is the fact that the data scientist, so to speak, is in the box. And because the more you know about statistics, I think, and the more you know about data science, the more you realize how easy it is to get it wrong. And it's hard to hang your hat on quicksand, right? That you want to make sure that you're being an honest broker in this. Because if you were just trying to forge your data, we could all just, make up a spreadsheet that looks good. But we want to be accurate because we know that it's going to make us better and it's going to help us report. And so even some of our customers have data scientists on their teams, and they use some of our data to help them, but we have other team members that don't have access to them because those data scientists, who are very expensive, are involved in very specific projects, and they're working on getting, major big answers to whatever those problems are that they've been, hired to solve, and they're not necessarily going to come and help you figure out if Facebook or Google or LinkedIn is having a statistical lift and is having, statistically positive lift at the SQL to SAL, stages, or, at SAL to close, or meeting set to, from discovery to meeting set, or any of those sorts of stages that, would require time, effort, and the will to engage.
Yeah. Interesting. So, all right, we could continue down this road, but I do. One of the topics that I actually really want to tease out of you, Harry, is around deep funnel. And this is something that I'm super interested in. And I want to know how it works and how you do it in B2B SaaS, because I think in the world of profitability that we're in now, this is something that people should be chomping at the bit to implement. And one of the other reasons I like it is because I like getting techie and building complex marketing ops flows, not just for the sake of doing them, but for the fact that it could be your competitive advantage if you get into the weeds. So let's dive in. Like, let's start with what is deep funnel,
Yeah.
and then like what are the
And so,
conversion windows? Like those are the two first things. And Ariel, answer what the conversion windows are in this.
yeah, and by the way, and those are variable, but we'll get into it. So to me, deep funnel is, we talk about a marketing funnel, is everything after the MQL. It could be everything after the form fill. In a lot of organizations, they try to get the form fill to be a demo request, and every demo request is an immediate, and they game the system to some degree to get those sorts of conversions. So, but it depends on your organization. But you can definitely think of it everything after the MQL, or everything after an initial form fill conversion.
I think for simplicity's sake, let's do form fill conversion, because I think that
Yep.
is like the Facebook, LinkedIn, Google, that's like their conversion is whatever form fill. And if your form fill is an MQL or not, like you can decide in your business.
Yep. And so it's real easy to get that form fill. You can get them for 50 cents, $1 a piece. At Bird Eye, I was generating 9,000 form fills a month, SMB mostly, and they're largely meaningless unless you have a very fast lead attack time. And what you're really doing is overworking your sales team or whoever's responding to them, and you're wasting a lot of that effort because single noise. You're not really finding out who you should speak to, and you're not you have so many that you can't reach out to them fast enough. Um, that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is attribution window. 7 days on Meta, 90 days on Google, particularly when we're thinking about mid-market and enterprise, we don't have sales that happen within 90 days. So how can this work? What are these offline conversions that I can do that add meaning? And my key insight, and this is in 2017, 2016, 2018, was, and I'm a lifelong, let's say the last 30 years I've been studying, following, interested in artificial intelligence and machine learning, that it was very clear at that point that Google and Meta had fantastic machine learning or artificial intelligence tools, and they connected it to the ad platform. In particular, they've connected it to, trying to improve lead quality, trying to identify leads, all of the process that goes in to figure out who gets shown an ad and what happens after it, and how do they improve that process over time.
Yeah.
And
Interestingly enough, I found out, to your point, last 30 years of AI came from a Neuralink concept in computer science, like the 60s, number one,
yeah,
thanks to the acquired podcast talking about NVIDIA. And then also Meta, which I didn't know, acquired Instagram because of their AI algorithm. So all of this was being done and that was in like 2013. I don't know when they acquired, but sometime in that time frame. So all that was done long before we're talking about it now. So continue on,
yeah,
like just to set the stage when you
because
say this.
yeah, because back then, particularly, you needed a lot of data to have value, to have it, actually work, and those were sort of the only companies that had enough data. So in 2019, Facebook is quoted as saying, if you have a signal that you want to, that represents a goal, if you can expose that signal to us and get 50 conversions a week, we'll optimize for that signal. So if that's 50 form fills, very easy. Ideally, it would be 50 close won deals. And at that point, you had a 28-day attribution window. And all of this, both on the Google and the Meta side, we'll call it Meta, comes out of e-commerce, where things did work quickly. You go to a store, you add some things to the cart, a good chunk of people check out immediately, and the rest that will check out will happen over the next 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, with shopping cart abandonment and people coming back, figuring out what they want to buy. It's a very edge or corner case that someone's going to take 2, 3, 4 weeks to come back and purchase, and I'm sure it does happen, but the bulk of the purchases happen fast. So all of these, what I call deep funnel or offline conversions in B2B SaaS, the essential core was trained on e-commerce. And so it's used to a lot of data. And the trouble, obviously, with B2B SaaS is, other than that form fill, people viewing our website, very little of that is happening online. And yes, you could get down to where if someone's actually buying, they sign a contract online or they put in a credit card, but there's really nothing in between. So you talked about the conversions. So post form fill, we would take all of the stages in the journey, MQL, SQL, SAL, all of the opportunity pipeline stages, all of those should be conversions that we're sending. If you're a small company, if you're a new company, if you're an enterprise company, focused company that doesn't have 50 sales in a year, let alone 50 in a week, one of the criticisms of doing this kind of offline conversion is that there's just not enough conversions. And so it's a great idea, but I don't have the volume and I can't spend enough to get 50 sales a week. And so deep funnel doesn't have to mean close won deals. In fact, it's rare, other than an SMB, that will be a goal that gets used frequently. So what I like to do is create additional, what I call synthetic events between the form fill and closed won. And a couple of good examples are, if you're using 6sense and you get a 6QA signal on an account. That's a synthetic event, and we can look at our database. This is done programmatically, but say, okay, everybody on that account who had a Google click in the last 90 days. Okay, we have GCL IDs that are still live. For those that are still live, let's go ahead and send a signal, a conversion, based on the fact that the account hit 6QA. And with Google's enhanced, what they call enhanced conversions, which don't require GCL ID, you in fact could send everybody associated with that account using their email and other identifying data. Another kind of synthetic event, most sales teams are using something like Chorus or Gong or particular sales tools from SalesLoft or Outreach. They're using demand base, whatever the tools are. There's signals in there. What kind of signals, Harry? Well, you know, someone being put on an outbound outreach sequence, somebody being on a phone call and it starts at the time that it was scheduled, or it doesn't cancel, or the length of the call, right? Because maybe we do some analysis and learn, if that half-hour discovery call takes the full half hour, that's great. If it takes 35 minutes, that's even better. But if it takes 5 minutes, that's generally not good. We can come up with as many synthetic events as we can find that are meaningful. Obviously, they have to be somewhat meaningful, but the goal is to create enough signal to, let's say specifically to Google, within that 90-day attribution window, so that they get a sense of which folks that have come in and converted, which ones are moving. And by looking at and laying out all this data, you can tell which ones are moving faster or slower, which ones go further. And obviously you have many different journeys that people take, and you'll have some that will go fast and deep. You'll have some that will go very slowly and but still get there. Again, that customer who has a customer base that takes sometimes 3 or 4 years to close. Obviously, you're not going to get a lot of that within 90 days. But the goal being to create enough synthetic events plus those journey stages so that there's a lot of action within that 90-day. Something that we're doing at Agent AI, where there's no monetary transaction, but we're just getting people signed up to use AI. If they come back the next day and use the AI again, that's a signal. And if they came off of Google and they come back a next day later, that's a synthetic event. I'll send value as a conversion.
Mhm.
If they come back for the next 89 days, I'll send a conversion every day, because that's signal that's important, so that Google can see which folks are actually retaining. I'd like to flip this on the head and explain, before I get into the further details, and I'm sure you have a million questions, but what is the impact of this, if that's all right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we're going to get down this rabbit hole, we got to know that we're going to make some money off of it, or we're going to make the business some money off of it.
So here's the teaser. When I've done this 4 times. I will see a CAC, fully weighted CAC, reduction between 35 and 50%.
I'm
So
silent to let that
imagine,
sink in. I mean,
yeah,
that spend on acquisition, and yeah, I mean, that's not small potatoes.
at Bird Eye, we took 35% reduction immediately, then a 50%, and then the pandemic hit. So we did drop spend at that point because the pandemic hit,
Mm-hmm.
and we focused on a few key verticals. Now, when you drop spend, when you're spending 4 or 5 million a year and you drop it back, you get a lot of efficiency. So, but that 50% is pre-pandemic. Post or during the pandemic, when the spend was radically dropped, and so there's just natural efficiencies in there, CAC went down 90%.
I mean, that's
So I
that
can't.
like for some, the difference between profitability and not profitable could be 5%, and you're talking 90%.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. And
in
again,
game,
and you're not always going to do that. You're not
yeah,
always
yeah.
going to have a
But
pandemic.
the thought that you can improve it significantly in this, and since 2022, profitability is the name of the game, and we see it all around. It's not just in, you know, efficiency and ad spend, it's, you know, reducing headcount, it's all of the above. And this
Well,
to me seems like one of those things that is something worth exploring. I mean, uh, just on that front
let me
alone.
go in a couple. Let me a couple more like critical points in this.
Yeah.
One being that if I say magic number, right, that's the number of months for a SaaS company based on their acquisition cost to get payback,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so imagine taking that magic number from 26, which would be 26 months to get payback, and take that magic number to 9 or 8. And then think about that pipeline motion that's, marketing, sales and marketing all together. We want to have well-trained SDRs, BDRs, and AEs that are earning a great living because they really know the product. And one of the best ways to do that is to give them really actionable leads. Well, when you're improving the lead quality and you're giving them less leads, but more that close, they're happy. The sales team is happy. And one of the other really interesting things of this is when you have this working well, and depends on the bidding strategy. Again, with Google, historically cost per action, but these days there's a bunch of bid options. When you scale spend, for the most part, you lose efficiency
Mm-hmm.
in paid. It's and you often spend a lot of effort to minimize the inefficiency gained. But I've been able to, at times, significantly expand the spend and increase efficiency at the same time. And it's hard to do, and I can't promise that's going to happen in every case, but it happens more often than not when you're using deep funnel. There's other things that, you got to work on your lead attack time. You've got to make sure you have a good message. You've got to make sure you have a good product.
Yeah.
There is one major negative to deep funnel, and this trips up some people who believe that the way that we win in marketing is we get an ever increasing pool of ever cheaper leads that convert really well.
Yeah. I mean, I remember from college in marketing 101, the professor, I don't know how Sac State landed him, but he had redesigned Harvey's in Tahoe. He had worked for McDonald's, and he said the biggest lie that you can ever have that doesn't ever exist is low price and high quality. And
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah. So we want to bring in 10,000 more leads this quarter, and we want them cheaper than the 10,000 we got last quarter, or the 9,000 we got last quarter, and we want them to perform better. One of the things that deep funnel does is it typically will increase the cost per lead. I've seen it increase the cost per lead 2 or 3 times. So, a $50 lead becomes $100 or $150 lead, but that's in pairing with the fact that CAC is dropping, and really from what I've seen, 35%
It,
or more.
yeah, and that comes to the point of you can't just look at it as the lead acquisition part of this, because again, if you're just looking at like the cheapest leads to come in, that's what drives most marketers to do white paper downloads on LinkedIn. And you can start to drive those. You know, maybe your demo requests off Google for high intent keywords are at $1,000, and you could generate $150 white paper downloads on LinkedIn, and that's what you end up doing. And because it's lower cost leads, but not, those convert at like 1%. I mean, if you're lucky at a lot of times. And
Yeah.
so that's the balance though. But then that's like a concept shift that you have to do internally, right? You have to shift it. And I don't know if you, and not everywhere you can do this. You have to have a team that's ready and willing to make, a philosophical shift that we're going to do it, cost per opportunity or cost per closed one or cost per
Yep.
some other metric than cost per lead. Because like you said, if it starts to go up, then you start to think that maybe it's not working.
Yeah. By the way, when I got the CAC down 35%, typically, the cost per opportunity was lowered more than that.
There you
Although
go.
they're generally in lockstep. Um, Here's a thought experiment. Let's say you have a SaaS product that costs $25,000. And so you want to have a magic number of 8 or 9, which means your fully weighted cost, roughly should be in, $15,000 range per deal.
And 8 or 9
Maybe
is our uh
8 or 9 months
payback.
payback.
Our magic number is our payback.
So what we really want is for every ad to cost $15,000, every ad click to cost $15,000. They click, they buy without a salesperson, and that's it. We spend 15,000, we get a deal. It happens quickly. Okay. That's the thought experiment. Obviously, there's no real world that happens. But when we can improve the lead quality and we can improve the sales process because we've reduced the volume of leads and increased the quality. So, we're consider hunting, grinding, fishing, whatever analogy you want to call it, they're having far more success. And like I mentioned, the customer that saw an increased AE output when demand gen is happening, you're also going to see those secondary and tertiary harmonics of, not only is demand gen going to be doing better, but all of the ancillary value. More people are going to know you, more people are going to call that 800 number or stop by your booth. It's just positive because ultimately, if you're wasting sales teams' time, not only are they not going to be happy, they're not going to be able to retain people, which means they're not going to be able to retain enabled people. So they're going to have folks that are on calls that really don't know what they're talking about. It's a negative flywheel. But in
Yeah.
fact, if you get qualified folks coming in and you're able to retain and grow and build sort of SDR to BDR to AE kind of pipeline or mid-market reps to enterprise rep pipeline, and you're retaining those people, very positive flywheel. And it's also, I think, really important that you do look at the fully weighted cost, all of the marketing labor, all of the marketing tools, all of the sales cost, all of the sales tools. That's the cost. It's not the cost of the ad.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
I've spoken to finance people and they want that out of the marketing team. They want the
Yep.
fully weighted number because that's how you think about, profitability or anything else. Um, and I want to go back to the sending better leads to the sales team and all of that. And in every team I've ever been a part of in 15 years, the fastest way to erode sales and marketing alignment or to have no hope at that ever coming back is to say you've got all these great leads and the sales team's looking at them and saying, this particular white paper has nothing to do with our product or service. They didn't even click on the responded email, and you call it an MQL and you're pointing it to me and saying that I need to call this. And that erodes it so fast. And ultimately, once you do it, I don't think you ever recover as a marketer. In that
Well,
organization, you have to basically move on organizations and try again after learning it. And I don't want to paint this like that's what the team wants is high quality leads that convert at 25%, or their demo requests to approved opportunities need to be somewhere in the 20 to 30% range for it to feel good. And then if they get to approved opportunities, they need to close at 25% sales cycle for it all to feel good. And to do and if you overperform that, then everybody's going to be very, very happy. But that's like the bare minimum to start saying that, okay, we're on the same page here, we can make improvements and we can keep going. And in our world, that particular relationship is a big deal.
And also think about just the buyer side of the journey.
Yeah.
Yes, there'll be a case where someone gets interested in your product, they're not interested in any other product, and they come in and they negotiate and buy your product. But the reality is, and at least in the real world, that even if you're the company that educates them about the pain point and they realize that they might need a solution, just if they're having a good faith effort, they're going to go look and see what else is out there. And so it's real easy now to say, Salesforce competitors, HubSpot competitors, Marketo competitors. And so then within a couple of minutes, you can go and fill out forms on a couple of pages. And in fact, when you do that, the ad networks will probably put more of those ads in front of you. So you almost don't, if it's certainly B2C on Instagram, once you say you want to buy some aged cheddar, all of a sudden you're going to see a bunch of cheese ads. The bottom line is we need to have a high, fast lead attack time. 5 minutes or less is the ideal, platonic ideal for the time that a lead comes in to the time that you've contacted somebody. And if you're driving lots of cheap leads, there's no amount of BDRs that they can hire to, it's just, they're going to have a lead attack time of a couple of days, maybe a week. And by that point, most people, whether they were interested or not, or qualified or not, may not remember filling out your page, and they may have gotten contacted by somebody else who's a little bit more responsive, and they're going to go down that journey first. So there's a lot of parts and pieces that have to work together, but ever increasing quantity of leads is never going to help.
Yeah, agreed. And on the lead attack time, the better leads you send the team, the more excited they're going to be every time something comes in. And what you don't want is the apathy to set in. But anyways, we don't need to talk about the team dynamics on that particular thing. I did want, I mean, are you okay on time? Like we are.
Well, I got plenty of time.
Okay. The whole point of the show is, how do you do this and why so many signals? Like, why manufacture so many signals? Let's start there. Why manufacture so many signals? If you send too many, are you confusing algorithms, or is it so let's start there.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's certainly the potential is there. You're sending a bunch of signal because you're not getting 50 deals a week or 30 deals a week.
You're manufacturing the fit.
Yeah, you're trying to get enough velocity and volume of conversions that the algorithm can pick the wheat from the chaff. And ultimately, the perfect way to do that is as e-commerce does, which is you run some ads, people spend money, it happens within 15, 20 minutes, and you have this rapid flywheel of optimization. The question becomes, and this is, I want to just a quick plug to Google here. I've worked with a bunch of really amazing reps over the years. Every rep that I've ever explained what I do has said, that's great. We can barely get anyone to actually implement this. And the way you're implementing it is generally more insightful than what we struggle to get people to implement minimally. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but there's a case study that we did with Google and RevSure and Agent AI, where we have a couple quotes from some of the Google reps. This is not only, in my mind, the best way to do Google ads. When I've done independent work, if a client isn't willing to do what, again, they call offline conversions, what I call deep funnel optimization, I wouldn't take them on as a client.
Wow.
It's possible, certainly, to optimize Google Ads without using offline conversions. But the amount of effort that it takes and the results that you get, for me, aren't worth it. There's plenty of people who do it, who never do offline conversions, and that would be the better consultant for that person. Fortunately, these days I'm fully booked, and I'm not taking on anybody other than the fine folks at RevSure and Agent AI. But the point is, you should be doing this. I think it's malpractice, not being flippant, but literal malpractice not to do offline conversions, not to have a deep funnel strategy because it's so impactful. But the question is, and this is from a machine learning perspective, it's kind of a rhetorical question. Let's just say we have two conversions. We have MQLs and SQLs.
Mm-hmm.
So a lead comes in for a $25,000 product. They hit MQL. We're going to send a conversion. A little bit later, they hit SQL. We're going to send a conversion. You can send that conversion without a dollar value. So you just send nothing, no value, but you're acknowledging the conversion. If instead, for every MQL, you gave them $100 value, and for every SQL, you gave them a $200 value, is that all you need? Like, that's my question to you, Logan. Like, what's the difference between sending zero value for everybody and $100 value for every MQL?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm supposed to know the answer to this, to be honest.
Well, the answer is almost nothing, right? There's almost no value in sending every MQL $100 value because you're telling the algorithm that every MQL is worth exactly the same amount.
And well, I guess technically, if all of your MQLs are form fills anyways, then you're telling Google nothing it already knew. In
Yeah,
addition,
yeah. And then so many MQLs, once they MQL, they almost automatically SQL if they filled out all the right metadata or you've enriched it. So you've got MQL and SQL that happen really fast for almost 80-90% of the form fill, and then you send the same value for everything. You've got a bunch of crap, to speak plainly. And so the question is, how can we do better? And the first thing is, I don't send form fill conversions when I'm setting up this sort of system. Google sees that people hit the web page. Google will see that they viewed forms, but I wait till they MQL. And then when they MQL, I'll send the form fill because there's so many bogus form fills. The other side of that is you can retract any bogus form fills. You can retract bogus MQLs. You can retract any of these conversions within the 90-day window. And that's also a strategy that has to happen. But where I'm going with this is, for this to be valued, and remember, this comes out of e-commerce. In e-commerce, every basket is a little bit different. Even if people are buying the same 5 or 10 or 20 products, let alone Amazon, where there's millions of products, every basket's a little bit different value, a little different speed. And the machine learning just thrives on all of those differences that humans, it kind of looks all the same. It blurs together. But machine learning can really dig into these. We want to send diverse signals that are not deterministic. Deterministic is every MQL gets $100. Another kind of sometimes bogus or poorly optimized approach is, well, for the MQL, we're going to send the average selling price or the average contract value. So we could send $25,000. Well, to me, that's too much. And we're never going to get to a sale, and we're inflating. And there are algorithms, buying bid strategies on Google where you can say, optimize for the value. Find the leads that get the most value. So you can use this as a direct conversion, or again, you could use a cost per action or a couple other options. So for me, I like to keep the value that I send pre-sale around 10 or 15% of the selling price. So when I do get a sale that goes through, it's a really big signal
So,
because
well, double clicking on the, or I don't even, I do not want to say double click in this, in this show. I do not want to do that. But on your 10% for, like, let's take MQL. Let's say that you have a really robust MQL scoring system and you know that it converts at, 10%, 15%, let's say even 20%. Like, what you really could do, or probably should do in this case, is start sending signals to Google at MQL as your first layer, discounted
yep,
to your conversion rate to closed won, and then separated by how you price different tiers of customers. So, like, if you're like a Salesforce type company where you're doing per user seats, like that kind of stuff, you can guesstimate on, you probably have enough data to say
yep,
that this size organization typically orders this many seats. So I can say our average contract value is going to be based on, 100 seats at a 15% conversion rate. And that's going to be the initial value that we send. And then,
yep.
like, looking back, and I'm sorry, I'm talking now to trying to kind of digest for me, and
No, but
maybe
you're on the right.
on the learner side, somebody in the audience gets it as well. And so if you're on the 7-day side on Facebook doing this, so Google's nice because you get 90 days to do it. So you can get pretty far into a sales cycle and give some pretty good signals to Google.
Yep,
And you can layer them on each time they hit different stages. But on the Facebook side, seven
yep.
days, you might hit the MQL, but then the only other thing that happens in 7 days might be a meeting, or depending on how long it takes you, or it's just that it became an approved op. So now, like, you then can decide, what are the 2 or 3 in 7 days that we can send at certain contract values. So then you could at least get, more stuff that's going to convert to pipeline, right? That's kind of,
Right. And we can create some synthetic events, you know, based on firmographics, based on did they set a meeting, based on how many days the meeting is. Did they pick something 3 weeks out? Did they pick something today, tomorrow? Did they show up for the meeting? Did the meeting actually happen? You know, you could use keyword analysis based on chorus or gong transcripts. You could create a whole bunch of incremental signals. That's often in my mind just like someone adding things to carts, right?
yeah.
You could get a lot in there. So I still worry about sending too much signal too early,
Mm-hmm.
but not so much for Facebook or Meta compared to Google. To me, the way that I've done it is, and I was lucky because at Bird Eye in 2018, already running for a year or more, I believe, they had their own machine learning algorithm that scored leads. And every lead got an A, B, C, D, or E, and got a score of 0 to 100. And I simply took that score and then weighted it by all the things that you mentioned, right? Is
Yeah.
it in the right vertical? How many employees do they have? At Bird Eye, location was important. So do they have 2 locations or 10 locations or 25 locations? And I would divide or multiply to get, to me, a fairly stochastic number. It's not deterministic. There's going to be some randomness in there, and that's okay because some will move faster than others, some will move slower, and the machine learning is going to glean all of that and bundle it in to understanding how to get more folks that I need.
Yeah.
And another reason that a lot of this is working well is also, if you remember, we're sending this all from the server side.
That that's a big deal, especially in, anti-cookie land and all of the other different stuff that happens.
Yeah, and again, these are for the most part offline anyway, but you can include incremental conversions. If someone within that 7-day period or that 90-day period does come back and attend a webinar or register for a webinar, you can include all of these things as conversions. And you don't, on the Google side, you could make them all individual conversions because you want to track them individually, or you could abstract it a little bit and have a content conversion that includes any kind of content, an event conversion that includes any kind of event from webinar to trade show. There's ultimately, I think the only rationale, what makes something better than others in terms of, do you have a million of them or a few of them, is what the system will allow. Facebook will allow less, but then also what you're trying to measure. So do you want to report on, event conversion versus content conversion versus, AR, BDR engagement, and so forth and so on. But then let's just imagine this now. So we got a lead that comes in, they fill out a form. We don't send any conversion yet. We nurture them a bit. They become an MQL. If that process takes more than 90 days, okay, this isn't the right motion for you. But, if you're able to get from a lead to MQL within a reasonable period of time, and let's face it, marketers are very eager to get those MQLs because that's our KPI,
Yeah.
that's our SLA. We're good. If you're an organization that's maybe being smarter about that, or maybe you're using Sixth Sense likes to recommend no conversions on content, right? So you ungate everything,
Yeah.
let people in, then only gate, demo requests, free trial offers, that sort of thing. That plays well here too. And now someone's in the funnel and you're sending all these synthetic and actual conversions for the period you're retracting where it makes sense. If something's bogus, if something's a spam, get a spam conversion that looks good, gets to SQL, and then we realize it's no good, retract it. You can do that automatically as well. One of the questions then someone in the audience is going to have is, well, but I can do all this with HubSpot. And the answer is almost all of this for the most part, except for this dynamic value. In HubSpot, you can send, if you have enterprise, you can send their predictive deal value. But I believe that's going to be too large of a number. And they may have made a change in the last 6 months since I've looked, but you could do this in Salesforce. And
question on that, though, sorry to interrupt, but question on the predictive value. Is that the only value in their out-of-box integration that they allow you to send, or could you create a dynamic field that updates for you to send?
No. I spent hours and hours with their team over the last 5 years with a prior team leader, Katie Koenig, who's amazing, but trying to get them to use just the lead score.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or
so out of the box
and then again,
integration.
it may have changed in the last 6 months since I've looked at it, and apologies if it has, but it just you're limited in that regard to sending no value or sending the same value. And yes, there's a statistical value that's, that you could use for every MQL, but, like Facebook in one of their documents tells you not to average things, not to smooth things out, right? Machine learning doesn't want a 1 to 5, they want a 1 to a million if they could have it.
Yeah. Well, and on this particular point, the difference in value, one of the criticisms in B2B a lot of times is the lack of control you have over the type of people that come in on your forms for businesses. Because that's, I think, one of the reasons why we gravitate towards LinkedIn all the time is because you have all the firmographic data on your audience building. And you don't necessarily have that on Meta or Google, but in this dynamic value, you can put that in. So let's say that you sell to manufacturing, somebody from government comes in, you can give government a 0 value, manufacturing 100, and it's going to want to start kicking the government side of stuff out for you. So now you have a level of firmographic control out of this that now puts it on par almost with a LinkedIn,
Yeah,
if you will, assuming that they're going to use a business email that gives you, but there's data providers that match personal and business emails anyway, so you can go down that route as well.
yeah. And it's generally pretty easy to figure out what vertical someone's in. That's not a hard thing. Learning who they are, I think, is harder and maybe legally questionable in Europe and a few other venues.
Yeah.
But um, learning what industry they're in. Um, look at another thing we learned at Bird Eye that was baked into the machine learning was the time of day for the type of leads they were going after really mattered. And but that's you know, every company in my mind should be doing something like Bird Eye, which is build their own machine learning tool. Or you say that's not our expertise, then go to a company like Six Sense. And there's others out there, but Six Sense does this very well. Every account gets a 0 to 100 score. Every lead gets a 0 to 100 score, as well as an ABCD score, as well as like target awareness, consideration, decision, or purchase stage. So and plus the 6QA if they're purchasing that, and so you have a great ability to use those signals as part of the scoring.
Hmm.
And um, at RevSure, we have similar types of scores for accounts, for leads, for opportunities. Um, and so I believe ultimately the best approach to this is this end-to-end machine learning, meaning a lead comes in, you score it with machine learning, you send it to Google, which has machine learning. Um, they target some ads based on that learning. People come in off those ads, they get scored, right? And then over time, you know, deals close, and we have a very nice flywheel going.
I can't help but you're calling it machine learning in this realm, but as we kind of alluded to, Neuralink in the 60s, 1960s for people, all the way to today, that machine learning that's happening there is AI. This
Yes.
is AI in marketing. Like, and
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that writing content with AI isn't interesting to me. Like, yes, do it, like all that kind of stuff, but
Let, let,
that,
let's talk about that for a minute
okay,
because I have an opinion.
good. I'm glad that I hit something that's a little controversial then, but good.
Um, yeah, look, there's a few researchers out there that I follow, like Ethan Mollick at Wharton.
Yeah.
Um, there's there's when done right, even not even done right, it's impossible to tell AI writing from human writing, as in like with this student paper written by AI or by student,
Hmm.
which is not to say that someone can't do it badly as a human, and you can use AI in a poor way. So the question is, how do you use AI appropriately or correctly? And the answer is whether it's the free, you know, OpenAI 4.5, or if it's the O1 Pro for $200 a month, or anywhere in between, or any of the other models, is one, don't take the first thing that you get, give it feedback, and give it a lot of context.
Yeah.
And so, if it's going to make a phone call, if it's going to send an email, the more information that you can give it, more to mimic what a smart researcher. In other words, if you hired an MBA student on an internship and all they did was research 3 or 4 hours on targets before you had a outreach to that target, we would can imagine thought experiment. That's going to be an amazing outreach. We're going to know their favorite sport. We're going to connect with them. We're going to know their pain points. That's going to be a great outreach. And if you have all of that data at your fingertips, I think the AI is going to do a great job.
It,
If it's
I want to clarify in that I'm not saying that I'm not on the using AI to write marketing content camp. I just think that that's the one that everybody's talking about. And
oh, no, I agree with
to
you.
clarify, and so I'm interested in going past that and seeing. So, yeah, I just want to clarify that was my.
You know, but again, people aren't. if it's how I can get this email done in the next 5 minutes, whether you write it yourself or the AI writes it, it's going to largely not be so great.
Yeah.
You and I have done emails
Yes.
together, and haven't necessarily spent a lot of elapsed time, but we've taken a few days to work it through. We've bounced it back and forth. We've done a final review together, and we get some great results.
Yeah. I mean, I had some of my best webinar registrations from AI helped email series, but it wasn't plug into chat GPT, get what it comes out. Like there's a whole prompt, like you said, you and I went back and forth on it and let us smooth it through.
And applying human intelligence where human intelligence has value.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful result. But yeah, it's not the panacea, and it's not the thing that's really going to move the needle for marketing compared to, say, deep funnel, compared to AI-based market mix modeling, compared to all the other things that we've been talking about, incrementality testing, and so forth.
Yeah. And I think that, I had something to like, what are the best use cases for marketers get started with AI? I mean, clearly there's the content one, but doing it as an iterative process. But then deep funnel and attribution and lift tests seem like another really great option to get deeper into the power of how this can be applied to making some real business impacts. I mean, I don't know if you have any others to add to that or any easier ones to get started with outside of
Well,
content writing.
I want to tie this back to deep funnel for a minute and
Yeah.
then move on. And by tying it back, so the crux of deep funnel is coming up with that kind of dynamic score. And I mentioned, like, you can do it in HubSpot. I started to say you can do it in Salesforce. It's fully integrated with all the marketing stacks. You're probably going to need a Salesforce developer to really create something powerful.
Mhm.
But if that's the resources that you have, that's great. You can do it in Zapier, and you've seen that done. I did that at Beekeeper initially. It's obviously a very flexible platform, but ultimately, and this is the same answer for AI, generative AI versus deep funnel, is you want to have a lot of data points. So for me, what brought me to RevSure almost right off of Beekeeper, I became an advisor, and then a few months later came on board to run their customer success team, was the fact that, oh, they've got the 6sense data through Salesforce. They got HubSpot, they've got SalesLoft, they've got all the ad networks. You've got this palette. Think of it like an artist with all the different colors. You want every shade and hue. When you have all of this data, you're seeing things that no other platform has. Google by themselves obviously sees a lot of data that no one else sees, the websites that people go to and such. But Salesforce has limited data. Marketo has limited data. SalesLoft has limited data. But when you can pull all of that in and use it for scoring, use it for any of these other activities that we're talking about, that's a win. And so then back to, what are the use cases and best practices for using AI in marketing? Then, it's having enough data to effectively partner with the AI.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and I think that's the real mindset, is if you treat AI like a partner, whether you treat it like your boss or your employee or your assistant or your intern or just a friend that you're having a beer with, but whatever your mindset, that you give it the resources and the repetition, you're going to be successful. I think for Gen AI, certainly emails, white papers, all of that. And a human expert who's looking at stuff at the end. Just like any organization has done for the last hundreds of years, usually the best organizations have somebody super knowledgeable taking a look at it. And if we have several knowledgeable people like you and I working on stuff, it's the peer review.
Yeah.
Hey, Logan, look at that's worked really well. Now, where else can AI play? Yeah, deep funnel, lift test, AI based market mix modeling. Um, to some degree. There's room in journey mapping. There's room in stitching together anonymous views with, browser fingerprints and those kind of motions. I think another major piece, and this is something that I'm not aware of anyone really doing, is if we think about interactive experiences on our landing pages, not a static landing page, but I've seen a few folks that do have a module that's dynamic HTML and people can interact with it and learn a little bit about a product because they've got a little bit of the UI, just a stub of it, but you can start to interact with a SaaS product, which is, obviously web-based, so it's not so hard to make a little interactive thing. But using AI to then, based on everything you know about that person, to create an experience funnel and bring them to the next little experience so that by the time they get to a sales rep or they get to a BDR or they get to a form, they actually have some experiential knowledge, experiential epistemology, if you will, with the product. And then, they kind of see the truth. Oh, this is easy. This solves my pain point. This could solve my pain point.
Mm-hmm.
Is a lot better than static. I think that's a great use for AI. Another may be HubSpot on their HubSpot CMS, and then Mutiny on their system. You have dynamic copy or smart copy, and you could start to use AI to generate some of that, either on a very individualized basis or even just constantly updating copy by vertical and industry. So, for example, if you think about Beekeeper, if someone's at a manufacturing facility and they go to a landing page, um, the site should be smart enough to load up all the manufacturing examples, all the manufacturing social proofs, all of the manufacturing white papers and the images of manufacturing plants. And if somebody else is from food processing or from food service, same thing. I think that's also an area where AI could play well.
Yeah, and some of this, like the experiential, is a situation where only AI can do that. Like well, that's probably not entirely true, but to be able to do that and create journey flows and things like that on a manual basis is extremely time consuming. And the conversion uplift to our uplift test before probably doesn't warrant the amount of investment, but AI can do that at scale for various things, almost like video games, if you will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and in fact, create the experience is where you're going.
yeah,
And yes, not only orchestrate statistically, which ones are lead, and in fact, soon I think with an autonomous agent, you would be able to create a test. It starts learning, which experiences pair well together. You know, find some statistical validity that it's driving either a higher selling price or faster deals cycles, and then over time these settle in and we have like a success. We have a set of experiences that we're using on a regular basis, but then it can continue in the background and keep on testing new things. And certainly because of how dynamic HTML is constructed and things like JSON and just CCS and so forth, and how good Gen AI is at creating structured content, and then again how good it is as writing code, you could potentially have it create those experiences. I think we're a few years from that, but I think that's well within the realm of possibility.
I mean, with the rate that things are moving, who knows? Moore's law has been turned on its head, so all of that. Well, Harry, I think I'm gonna get to some takeaways here. I anticipated doing an hour, and I think as our conversations normally go, we can get down the rabbit hole and go long. And I really appreciate being able to go deep on all of these topics because to me, and I'm hoping with all of this, that's what we can do with this particular show and get past surface level and improve. And one of the things before I get to takeaways is just one of the trends I think we'll see is smaller marketing teams, marketers having to do a lot more, A, with less, but also themselves. And hopefully, in this kind of a thing, we can give new skills, how to do things better, especially with deep funnel and attribution that can, you know, help you attack your new role in this new world of profitability even better.
But that's certainly a trend. I'm seeing small marketing teams that are 100% top notch, not somebody. There's nothing wrong. We have plenty of marketers that came from other experiences, other jobs, and became marketers. I'm not talking about where they came from, but hiring people who have years of experience, depth of experience, and putting a small team of them. I'm seeing that again and again with customers, and it's a winning combination.
Well, good. So just a few takeaways to leave the audience. Then I've got two final thought questions for you, Harry. So the first is I've got kind of gibberish down here, but it's using multi-touch and AI and lift tests to see all of that complexity and which is the right stuff, as well as market mix modeling. When thinking about metrics, it's good to get in the weeds and ladder that up to the overall business metrics. We want to know how the business metrics, if we're reporting on 3 metrics at the top level, we want to know how that's baked so that we understand where it's moving and why. And then funnel gets you CAC reduction. I think it's, that's the headline. Deep funnel is going to get you better payback. And it's one of many ways that marketers can use AI. And all of that AI and everything else is based on a lot of data, and treat it like a partner. Anything else you want to add,
But
Harry?
it will also increase this or shorten the deal cycle.
And that's a win.
Again, it's going to vary on the industry. It's going to vary on the maturity of the business that you're connecting this to, but there's a right way to do it for all of those options. Even if you're some massive SaaS company that's literally selling 50 deals a week and you don't need all these synthetic conversions, you still want to be sending these signals and these values. It's only going to help.
Good to note. And last 2 questions. One, and you can either tell me after and not on recorded or on recorded, but who should I talk to next on the podcast, or who should I try and have on the show?
So I got 2 answers.
Yeah.
One, I think there's a bunch of RevSure customers that I'd have to get clearance before I'd mention, and I think they would make fantastic guests because, as I mentioned, they're really smart, detailed, focused marketers. A lot of folks in marketing and RevOps and in digital demand gen and all of those areas that we love. But the definite person that you should have on, of course, is our friend Frederick Herman.
All right. I will hit him up and see if we can get him signed up. Teaser, I'm chatting with him tomorrow. So yeah, I'm hoping to have a good episode with him as well.
I worked with him at Bird Eye. I worked with him at Beekeeper, a couple other places. He's a fantastic marketer.
I would be excited to have a conversation with them. And then lastly, where would you like people to connect with you? If you want them to connect with you. If you want to be anonymous, that's fine too.
You can find me on LinkedIn, and that's a great way to go. Harry Hawk. You can email me, harry@revsure.ai. And you can also find me on Twitter at HHAWK. And, I'm out there. I'm happy to engage, and, I love to talk about marketing. So,
as do I. Well, Harry, I appreciate the time. I love being able to chat with you, and thank you again for walking us through a wealth of knowledge. I think this is going to be like 3 episodes, but I don't know. I think there's enough for a part 2 even. So who knows?
Yeah, I think that you can definitely split it up. I want to come back to the beach stuff because I think we skipped over some of the interesting parts.
Sure. Let's hear it.
So we had a reliefing platform, a couple acre parking lot. The first day of business, we did $17, and I was despondent because, we had invested more than $17, right? It just seemed like, how is this going to work? Fast forward a couple years, our busiest day, close to $200,000. That includes DJ take, bar, food, and the metrics. We were in the top percent of liquor sales in New York City. We sold 110 kegs of beer a week. We did about 10,000 people a weekend. We sold 500 case equivalents of wine and spirits each season. And again, thousands and thousands of hamburgers and tens of thousands of hot dogs, all kinds of interesting, quirky events, but beach basketball, and all of this just with 3 or 4 or 5 inches of sand, played out on a wharf right on the East River. And, what it taught me what was focus and pivoting, to get from $17 to a couple $100,000 in sales in a single day. It was just every day thinking, what's the one thing I'm going to improve today? And then just making that pivot. And I think that's largely my approach to marketing as well. Obviously, the time scale is a little bit different. You can't always have an immediate impact the same way you can at a live venue. That is what excited me about the beach bar. And there's a lot more I could say about it, but not necessarily interesting to a marketing crowd. So
I don't know. We may all wish that we had been living in New York City in the mid 2000s. And after hearing that, I kind of wish I did. But hey, here we are. And I think what you can improve each day is a good thing to think about. And I think sometimes we let marketing seem like it's going to be a laggard, but you can move faster. I think you can always move faster than what you think you're doing now. So I think that's a good call out. With that,
well,
we
that's all
will
I
get on
got.
to the rest of your day.
Well, thank you, Logan. It's a pleasure anytime.